Welcome back to Instant Boxing. I'm your host, Albert Baker. It's time for the opening bell. Tonight's opening bell segment, we had two big boxing events happening in the world. Big fight out in the UK between Jorge Linares and Crolla, the rematch part 2. Then you had boxing's return to ESPN. PBC had locked up all the networks, shut all the other promoters out. Now we finally have the return of the outside, bringing options back to the consumer. Golden Boy taking it over, 42 fight card contract with ESPN, starting it off in Indio at the Fantasy Springs Casino. Jay Quigley as the main event, the return of Randy Caballero out of the ring for over a year, and Marlen Esparza opening up the televised portion of the card. Marlen Esparza came in against a way overmatched foe, but she definitely looked sharp, got the victory, shut her out on all 3 scorecards. Of all the females coming out of the amateurs, I think Marlen Esparza and Katie Taylor look the absolute sharpest. Marlen Esparza, though, did a couple things that Katie Taylor doesn't do that's a little bit amateurish on the side of Katie Taylor, whereas she'll throw these amazing combinations, but she tends to stay in the pocket a little bit too long, waiting to get caught by a better foe. Whereas Marlen Esparza, she showed real good movement. She was real crisp with her punches. She was something good to watch. It was rather amazing. Now, granted, she was in there with limited opposition, but nevertheless, I'm looking real forward to seeing Marlen Esparza fight again. In the co-main event, Randy El Matador Caballero had a little bit of ring rust on the return, but still, nevertheless, looked great. Round out a 10-round unanimous decision over late substitute opponent Jesus Ruiz. This dude gave Diego De La Hoya all he could handle, was been in there with some really good names, Leo Santa Cruz. This guy comes to fight. Originally, Caballero scheduled to fight Victor Proa, a fight that was not a soft touch, but yet still a more winnable fight than against Ruiz. And at the last minute, opponent changed to Ruiz. Ruiz, definitely a tougher opponent, was going to show a lot more of what Randy Caballero was going to have affecting him with the long layoff. Caballero came in, boxed well, did good things, showed great movement, had great punch selection, firing uppercuts, used his jab when he was on the outside, absolutely controlled the fight, but still showed the balls and cojones to go on the inside, mix it up, make it rough. Created an exciting fight for the fans, his hometown fans in Indio. Caballero from Coachella, which is just a couple miles away from Indio, had the big hometown crowd supporting him. It was a good action fight, way to bring ESPN back into the boxing scene. Caballero winning the fight, scores in 97-93, 96-94 twice. Good, solid action fight, way to return. Hard-fought fight against a very solid opponent. Not a guy that's technically a stepping stone. He's a guy that can come in and actually beat people. So I'm looking forward to see Caballero return against a tougher foe at 122. Maybe get back in the ring a lot sooner than a year. That's a little bit too long for a guy his caliber to be staying out of the ring. Hopefully Golden Boy keeps him on track to fight again maybe within the next 4 to 6 months. Preferably 4. Jason Quigley, the main event, coming in against Glenn Tapia. Glenn Tapia, big underdog. Quigley, big favorite to win this fight. Not only win, but win by knockout. Quigley comes out hard in the first round, cracks Tapia with the right hand, wobbles him, injures his hand in the 3rd round. Fights on nevertheless. Tapia has some momentum back in the middle rounds, but doesn't necessarily win a lot of rounds, but still hits Quigley with a lot of punches. This was a back and forth fight, and it showed that Quigley had some grit. Quigley kind of taking a little bit of shit from the commentators and Bernard Hopkins and Teddy Atlas. Teddy Atlas calling Quigley not a pro yet, not a 10-round fighter yet, not knowing about the injury to Quigley's hand. Nevertheless, Quigley boxed well with the left hand, still fired the right even though it was injured. Take a look at this picture of his stovepipe on his right side there. That looks like it hurts, and I'm pretty sure whenever you get injured like that in a fight, you're going to stop throwing that thing. Guy still threw that punch. Guy still fired, still boxed, still won the fight. Did show that he got a little bit tired in spots. Did show that he lost focus a little bit in spots. But let's remember, that was Jason Quigley's 13th fight only. Golden Boy at times has propensity to move fighters along a little bit faster than they should. I think already bringing Quigley up against guys like James De La Rosa, the Glenn Tapias. Those are good levels for him to stay at for now, since they've already brought him up to that level so quickly and so early in his career. They shouldn't start matching him against the A-level middleweights for at least another 5 or 6, maybe even 7 or 8 fights. Let him mature at this level against this type of opposition before you start throwing him in there with the David Lemieux, the Canelo Alvarez's, the Jamal Charlos. This is a point in Quigley's career where I don't want to say you want to handle him with kid gloves, because at that level, even the C and B level, those are still very good fighters who can always perform at an A level on any given night. But Quigley still not ready for the big time yet, but definitely showed that at some point in time in his career, the big time will not be too big for him. ESPN had a pretty good card. Golden Boy had a couple of issues to be worried about. Quigley, number 1, injuring his hand. Number 2, letting a guy like Glenn Tapia fight back in a way that a lot of people didn't think he would be able to. A lot of people thought Quigley was going to put Glenn Tapia out of his misery and maybe retire him. Maybe he gave Tapia more in a loss to Tapia by blowing a little bit of life back into Tapia's career, because Tapia performed well. He definitely earned himself another fight on TV. And since Tapia has a little bit of a name, he'll probably get that fight on TV against another Golden Boy fighter or against a top-ranked fighter. So it was good for Tapia's career to do that. Golden Boy nevertheless successful in boxing's return to ESPN. This was significant because ESPN was promised all these fight cards from all these PBC fighters, and they never materialized. You had 3 fight cards from the PBC that aired, with the biggest being the Leo Santa Cruz Abner Mares fight, and then it seemed like boxing all but disappeared on the largest sports network in the world, with PBC choosing to go instead with the cards on Fox Sports 1 that have a lot less viewership. With Golden Boy's return and the promise to match their prospects tough, this builds a little bit of excitement, because now you have all these fighters that Golden Boy had that was undefeated that could possibly and potentially be matched up against each other. Don't forget, Golden Boy has a deep prospect stable at 122 and 126. You got guys like Joseph Diaz Jr. and Manuel Avila who are going to be fighting each other on the May 6th Canelo undercard. Both undefeated guys. You still got Abraham Lopez, Julian Ramirez if he ever fights again. Abraham Lopez, another one. Guy hasn't really done much since he beat Julian Ramirez in the battle for Los Angeles. Those two guys, very hot prospects in the LA area, both undefeated at the time that they fought. Both were very competitive in that fight. So seeing the two of them get back in the ring would be another exciting thing. You got guys like Ronnie Rios on the roster. You got guys like Emilio Sanchez on the roster. Joet Gonzalez, his brother Joust Gonzalez. There's a lot of good little fighters on the Golden Boy roster that can pack a lot of these ESPN cards. Hopefully they match them right. Keep the smaller fights in the smaller venue at the Belasco in downtown Los Angeles. Make the traveling road show with the Golden Boy fighters that are already becoming a little bit established, or maybe put them in a larger venue in Los Angeles. And with the name of ESPN getting on network TV, you'll sell a little bit more tickets. A lot of those fights are big fights in the LA, Southern California, whole California region. So you'll be able to sell tickets to those. This is a big deal for ESPN and a big deal for the return of boxing to that network. In the UK, you had Jorge Linares coming in against Anthony Crolla. First fight was an all-action fight. Crolla really put the pressure on Linares and made him fight his fight in spots. Wasn't the case. Jorge Linares looking masterful, throwing punches in combination from about 1,000,000 angles. Linares probably boxed the best fight I ever seen him fight in his life. He could not do anything wrong against Anthony Crolla, and Crolla just could not do anything right. Linares did everything absolutely perfect against Anthony Crolla, and no matter what Crolla would have came with, it wouldn't have mattered, because Linares hit his stride and there was no turning back. That was it. Linares coming out boxing well, dropped Crolla with an uppercut late in the fight. It was the type of performance that puts a stamp on your legacy. Whether or not Crolla faces Mikey Garcia next or not, it should put Linares in the conversation for pound in the world. Maybe I'm thinking 5 through 10. I don't want to put him in the top 5, although if you talk to a lot of the die-hard boxing crowd and boxing media after watching that performance, he definitely should be in the pound-for-pound conversation. I wouldn't put him in my top 5 because of the opponent that he was facing. Anthony Crolla, yes, he's a tough, come-forward, rugged fighter, but that's what he is, a tough, rugged, come-forward fighter. He's not necessarily a pound-for-pound guy, so Linares doesn't get the credit for being in the top pound-for-pound unless he beats a pound-for-pound guy. Now, Linares, Crolla, fight was a mandatory for WBC 135-pound champ Mikey Garcia. Mikey Garcia and Linares now slated to fight against each other. Will they fight against each other? That's the fight I really want to see. I'm sure that's the fight you really want to see. Is Linares really the business? Most people in the world know and believe that Mikey Garcia is the business. Jorge Linares at one point in time in his career had some trouble with fighters. He wasn't necessarily at the level that he's at now early in his career. Got beat by Antonio DeMarco, turned around, got beat by Sergio Yayo Thompson. Will he stay on the level that he's at? And the level that he's at, is that high enough to compete with a fighter the caliber of Mikey Garcia? That's the question that I want answered. That's why that fight needs to get made. I don't know if Golden Boy wants to put Linares, who's riding this high right now of good publicity and good positive media about his pound-for-pound status, do they want to really risk that against a guy like Mikey Garcia? That's the question that needs to be asked. That's the question that needs to be answered. That's the question I'm going to go forward asking at these media events that we go and cover, because if Linares doesn't face Mikey Garcia now, it really doesn't matter, because there's not another 135-pound fighter at the level of those two guys that people really want to see them fight. Robert Easter is an interesting candidate for them to fight. I wouldn't be upset if Linares went after Easter or if Mikey Garcia went after Easter, but really, these two guys aren't at the money-making level of Canelo or even Triple G for that matter. So it wouldn't make sense for them to not go after the biggest fight that they can go after right now. These guys ain't going to be at that type of pay-per-view caliber main event status for a while. So there's no reason at all why negotiations couldn't be made, concessions couldn't be made by either side in order to get that fight done. I'm sure if you ask Jorge Linares and Mikey Garcia, they're both going to look at you square in the face and say, I'm the best in the division. Yes, I want that fight. Please make that fight. I hope that business doesn't get in the way of that fight happening, because that's going to take away from you. Obviously, it's going to take away from me. It's going to take away from this show. It's going to take away from boxing, period. It's going to be like two bullies on the elementary schoolyard just playing takeaway. I don't want that to happen. I want to see that fight. I know you want to see that fight. Comment down below. If you don't want to see them two fight each other, tell me who you want to see fight. And that's the opening bell.